Shavua Tov. We just read Parashat Vaetchanan and Shabbat Nachamu. Now, the Torah reading that we've been doing every Shabbos, we've learned a lot about it because of the coronavirus and the problem with standing right next to each other. So it's given us an opportunity to really look into the laws of Kriyas HaTorah. The original way that we did Kriyas HaTorah before centuries is different than what we do now. What used to be was that there would be, yes, 7 people called up to the Torah to read. Each of the people who got an aliyah read their own aliyah, but only 2 made the blessing. The Kohen at the beginning would make the first blessing, and then everybody who came after relied on his blessing to keep reading. So the Kohen would make the first blessing and read his aliyah. The Levi would come up and just start reading and read his aliyah, and then sit down, and the Shlishi would come up, and neither of them would make any bracha, not before, not after, and only the 7th one at the end would make a bracha at the very end. So all of the readers relied on the Kohen for the first bracha and on the Shvi'i, the 7th aliyah, for the last bracha, for the last blessing. And they didn't make a blessing in the middle. The rabbis were uncomfortable with this because they were afraid people might make a mistaken impression. If they come to the synagogue late, they don't see the Kohen. I know that doesn't happen, but in the rare chance that it does happen, someone came to the synagogue late, they didn't see the Kohen. They got there after the Kohen had already started, so they didn't hear that the Kohen made a bracha. And then they see the next guy come up and starts reading without a blessing. He thinks, oh, you don't have to make a blessing before you read in the Torah. And there might be somebody who has to leave early because he has a kiddush on the other side of town, and he doesn't know that the Shvi'i, that the 7th one is going to make a bracha at the end. He just leaves after he sees people finish reading and sit down without a blessing. He thinks, oh, you don't have to make a blessing after you read the Torah. And so because of this, the rabbis made a special rule that every aliyah must make a blessing before and after. Everyone who gets an aliyah says both blessings so that nobody should make the mistake and think that you can read from the Torah without a blessing before or after. Why did this worry them so much? There's a pasuk in the Haftorah that we read last week. Alma avada haaretz. Why was the land lost? Al ozvam et torati. They left my Torah. Now, what does it mean they left my Torah? The rabbis in the Gemara say that they didn't say the blessings before reading the Torah. That was the sin. No blessing before reading the Torah. That's the sin. For that, the land was lost. Wow. What a strict punishment for something that doesn't even seem to be required. Yes, we're supposed to make blessings, but our general rule with mitzvot is that the blessing is not what we call me'akev. The failure to make a blessing before performing a mitzvah does not invalidate the mitzvah. If I went on Sukkot and I picked up my lulav and etrog without making the blessing, I still fulfilled the mitzvah. I still get reward for the mitzvah. Okay, I violated a rabbinical rule that you're supposed to make a blessing before. But we have lots of cases where there's a doubt, and we tell people don't make a blessing because there's a doubt whether you need to make the blessing, but still do the mitzvah. So since when do these blessings on reading the Torah get such an elevated status that the rabbis were willing to make 5 other people make 2 blessings, and 2 people, the Kohen and the Achron, make the end blessing and the first blessing, to add on all these blessings which are really unnecessary. You know, in Torah we have a rule that one is not supposed to make an unnecessary blessing. If you're eating an apple, you make 1 blessing before you bite into the apple, and that covers the whole eating the apple. Somebody who makes a blessing for each and every bite is making what's called a bracha she'eina tzricha, an unnecessary blessing. This is taking God's name unnecessarily. It's a sin. But the rabbis felt it was so important that by Torah reading they didn't want to rely on it. They wanted to make sure that everybody made the blessing and nobody made a mistake. Why? My teacher, Rabbi Meir Fendel Shalita, who lives today in Yerushalayim in Beit Tuvei Ha'ir, he was one of the greatest, the word in Hebrew is keruv rechokim, bringing people who are far from Yiddishkeit, from Judaism, to bring them close, to bring them back to lead a Torah-observant life. He came to an area called Long Island. For those of you who know, it's a large area outside of New York City, and it was a Jewish spiritual desert. There really wasn't a Torah presence there to speak of. And Rabbi Fendel came and he built an elementary school, which then created other branches, and he built a high school, and he built a large synagogue, the Young Israel of West Hempstead, one of the biggest synagogues in Long Island. And he went ahead and he brought in the youth movement, the NCSY from the Orthodox Union. He did tremendous amounts of Keruv Rechokim and really turned Long Island into an area where there are a lot of Torah places. I have to say that in the merit of many of the things he did, I am here today and I'm sharing a Dvar Torah with you, and I chose to live this lifestyle. What is the secret, says Rabbi Fendel, of bringing people close, of Keruv Livavot, of bringing hearts close? To understand that Jews have an insatiable thirst to fix the world. It's part and parcel of our character. Now, if we have a Torah framework to fix the world, then that's it. Those of us who understand Torah, learn Torah, keep the commandments, we are doing our best to fix the world, and we feel tremendously fulfilled in this process. But Jews who don't have that exposure, who don't know Torah, who didn't learn it, weren't brought up with it, for whatever circumstance might have been, they will seek their own ways to fix the world. And that's why all of the movements that are fighting for this cause or that cause have Jews in high proportion, because this is a Jewish thing to want to fix the world. Now, in some cases it's fine, it's innocent. In some cases the values that they're fighting for are values that are diametrically opposed to the values of the Torah, because for the Jew who has an emotional, deep need and thirst to fix the world, very often the first one who convinces them that they have the cause to do it will get their participation. And sometimes it's tragic that we find Jews leading the charge in things that are in antithesis to the values of Torah. So Rabbi Fendel says that you need to understand that there is this thirst, and you need to show the people that the way to truly fulfill this thirst of fixing the world is to do it in the way that God says, to do it in the way of the Torah. And that is the secret of doing it. There's a very clever statement by the Rabbi of Kutsk, one of the great Hasidic masters, who takes a look at a verse in the Parsha. He says, be careful, the Pasuk says, lest you forget the covenant of the Lord your God that he made with you, and lest you make an idol, an image of everything that God the Lord has commanded you. Now that implies, says the Kutzker, if you read it just superficially, that God commanded you to make those images and those idols. Obviously that's not the case. It should say that God commanded you that you should not make an idol or an image of all of the things that God commanded you not to, or that God forbade you to make. Why does it say that God commanded you? So the Kutzker changes the phrasing of the verse, and he says, lest you make an idol, an image of everything that God has commanded you. What does it mean, an image of everything that God has commanded you? That you're going to make your own Judaism. You're going to make something that is the image of what God commanded you, that is similar to the Torah that God commanded you, but it's not what God commanded you. And we find, unfortunately, that sometimes the people espousing causes which they do with complete sincerity and purity of heart, but error of judgment, that these causes that they espouse somehow claim to be authentic Jewish causes and misuse the liturgy, misuse the Bible in order to justify this cause, or to claim that this cause really comes from the Torah when it absolutely does not. You can talk about freedom as a Jewish value, but to what do you apply the freedom? Do you apply the freedom to do things that are antithetical to the Torah lifestyle? So yes, you're taking a Torah concept and you're applying it in the opposite intention. So that's what the Kutzker said one needs to be careful of. Tmunat kol asher tzivcha Hashem Elokecha, making something which is the image of what God commanded you, but is not what God commanded you. And the Kutzker is basically saying that this thirst to fix the world is truly there, and people are seeking the spirituality. So if you show them not an image of what God commanded you, but if you show them what God actually commanded you, so then you're going to succeed in channeling that thirst in the direction of Torah. That is the secret, says Rabbi Fendel, of bringing people close to Torah. And part of that secret is to surround ourselves with the influence of Torah. In the Parsha, we read the most famous verse of the Torah, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, which is recited. The Shema is the prayer recited every morning and evening. And the first chapter of the Shema is in this week's Parsha, and it talks about this exact thing, that you have to love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your possessions. In other words, you have to be from within. And then you have to be surrounded. These words have to be on your heart, and you shall teach them to your children. So it's going parents and children, so are surrounded in a generational way with words of Torah. And you shall speak in them as you as you sit in your house, as you walk on the way. So in other words, in space, you're surrounded by Divrei Torah. In time, when you sleep and when you wake up, you're surrounded in time, in space, on your body. Tie the tefillin on your arm, tie the tefillin on your rosh. Put the words of Torah in the mezuzah on your door, on the gates of your cities. Be surrounded by Torah and Judaism. That's the secret. Rabbi Fendel tells an amazing story about a student who had been part of the Lubavitcher Hasidic movement, but he had decided he was going to leave, and he sent a letter to the rabbi, the grand rabbi, who somebody called the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. He sent him a letter saying, "I'm sorry, I have to leave." Not only was he leaving observance, he was leaving Judaism. He wanted to accept the Christian Messiah. And he wrote to the Rebbe, "I can't stay here anymore because your Hasidim is hostile to my new Messiah, who I believe in." Well, normally when a Jew is ready to go and become a Christian, that's already too far. That's already too far. But the Lubavitcher Rebbe still responded to him. Now, I'm not going to tell you the end of the whole story because I don't know it. I don't know what the end result was, but that's not important. The important thing is to understand, how did the Lubavitcher Rebbe respond to this extreme letter, a student saying he's going to believe in the other Messiah from the Christians? What's that? So what did the rabbi write? He says, "Stay a few more weeks and be with us. We have the holidays coming." I don't know if it was, I assume it was Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And Sukkot. We have the holidays coming. Stay with us through the holidays. Just give us a few more weeks. And then after the holidays, you'll think what to do. What was the rabbi saying? He was saying, be surrounded again with Judaism, with faith, with Torah, because the holidays, the Jewish holidays, are an immersive experience. We're surrounded by Torah and mitzvot. And that is the secret. That is the key of bringing people close. To surround ourselves with Torah and mitzvot and with the values of Torah and the Torah way to fix the world. And that, I believe, is the reason why the blessings on the Torah are so important. Because reading the Torah without the blessings, one might be tempted to make, as the Kotzker Rebbe said, Tmunat kol asher tzivcha Hashem Elokecha, the image of everything that God commanded you. In other words, a person might be tempted to make their own Judaism, espousing values that are opposed to Judaism, and claiming that it comes from Judaism. So therefore the rabbi says, nothing doing. You have to know that before you read from the Torah, you say, Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, that God chose us from all of the nations, v'natan lanu et Torato, and gave us his Torah, that this Torah is coming from heaven. It's not made up by people, no matter how intelligent they may be, no matter how nice or good they may be. It's coming from heaven. And at the end, what do we say? Asher natan lanu Torat emet, that he gave us a Torah of truth. And eternal life he planted within us, in our midst. In other words, when you read the Torah, if you have the Torah surrounded by the blessings, then the Torah that you read, you will approach it not in a way that you're going to fight against it, but you're going to approach it understanding just what it is, and you will then embrace it, espouse it, and then you will go out and really fix the world. May we merit to see many of our fellow Jews understand the beauty of Torah, that the Torah is the way to truly fix the world. May they come close to Yiddishkeit, come close to observance, come back, and maybe all together merit to see indeed a world that is fixed. Shavuot Tov.